So remember, just needs to write three significant things from today's lesson. Once again, this is different hats, the different roles basically that the president plays. Now, first of all, the president is head of government. Head of government. And his role as head of government, which is similar to the prime minister of the United Kingdom, for instance, or the chancellor of Germany, as head of government, they are basically the chief administrator. They are in charge of government operations because they're in charge of all those hundreds of thousands or 1 to 2 million, federal employees carrying out the daily functions of the United States federal government. But they're also the chief executive, which means they're enforcing the law. They're in charge of all the policing agencies, making sure that the laws that Congress passed are being followed. And so, through these two roles, chief administrator and chief executive, he's basically making sure the government's running. Now, that makes us think that he's in charge of the government. Remember, he's only in charge of one branch, the executive branch. And often we concentrate so much attention on the president, we say that we're electing the leader of the country or the leader of the government. Really, we're just electing the leader of the executive branch. So, head of government includes, once again, the positions of being an administrator and an executive. He also is the head of state. Now, in many other countries, this is a separate position. In the United Kingdom, it's the Queen of England. In Germany, it's a president. In fact, presidents in some countries are very weak positions, they're just a figurehead. But he also holds the head of state position, and it includes a couple different roles. First of all, he's basically the chief citizen. He is the representative of the American people, both domestically inside the country and in foreign matters. He speaks on behalf of the American people. He speaks to the American people, and he is a general representative of the United States of America. In this role, he's also supposed to, of course, be a role model and set an example for the people, and so on. He also, in his role of head of state, is a chief diplomat. He gets to go to different conferences and meetings all over the world. NATO, the G7, for instance, which is the seven wealthiest countries in the world that have meetings occasionally. The United Nations. Any of these types of formats, if he is the one that's there, he outranks all the other American officials, so he gets to speak on behalf of the United States. So, in that respect, he is the chief diplomat. And he also gets to meet and greet foreign dignitaries. If he's traveling abroad, he meets with them. If they're coming here, he hosts them at the White House or some other type of facility. And so that is basically his role as head of state, a figurehead type of status. Legally, he is also, of course, the commander-in-chief, and that's separate from these other two roles. He outranks everyone in the United States military, generals and admirals alike. And so he has hiring and firing prerogatives. Although when he hires high-ranking officers, of course, they have to be approved by the United States Senate, just like other types of government officials. And they report directly to him, and they must follow his orders. The probably most famous example would be President Harry Truman. One of his generals who had been successful during World War II and then Korea was General MacArthur. And General MacArthur was a very outspoken man. It was very apparent from his opinions. He wanted to engage directly with China, which many believe would start a world war if he did that. And so the president basically told him to stop expressing those opinions. But then, of course, General MacArthur continued to do that. And he also made some disparaging comments about the president. So the president fired him, basically. And there was a large uproar about it. But, of course, after the full story came out, many experts eventually sided with the president of the United States. So ultimately, it's the president that gets to make those kinds of calls. Informally, he is also the chief of his party. And so even when there is a party chairperson, they're basically going to go along with whatever the president says. And a large amount of the party is going to fall in line with him. President Trump is evidence of that because there is a Republican national chairperson, but she is basically going to do whatever the president says. And in fact, the president and his campaign have managed to put loyal people in charge of the different 50 state parties as well. So generally, especially if the president is good at organizing, then they are going to assume full control over their political party. So chief of party is another role that they can also play. That isn't to say the president also does other things. Obviously, they're involved in entertainment. They'll go on TV shows and radio. That's been going on for a long period of time. They're a communicator to the rest of the country. They also can become involved with legislation. Obviously, they give a State of the Union where they propose things and then constantly talk about it on TV about different types of policies they would like produced or laws they would like passed. But it's important to remember that they are not part of the legislative branch. All they can do is make proposals. That's why they have party allies in Congress that will basically propose what they want. And from a judicial's perspective, they also do have some influence, of course, especially through the Justice Department. The Solicitor General is the government's main attorney, and they're going to do whatever the president says, whether it's filing suit against someone or prosecuting someone to the full extent of the law, even taking them the whole way to the Supreme Court. But once again, it's important to remember the president is not part of the judicial branch. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? None?